Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Susan, for the generous introduction. And I'm so pleased to be here. You know, Susan is one of those people, I don't know if I should say it publicly, but she's one of those people, if she calls me, I'm going to give her whatever she needs. It's normally going to be a yes. And that's good because that speaks of the relationship that we have, which is what we're going to be talking about here today. Is about relationships. And I won't get into, some of my stories and backgrounds will come up as we go along. And I invite you to feel free to ask me. Here's the thing. I am not doing the, look at the screen. I'm a very much, we're going to talk our way through it. We're going to engage. I invite you to engage in the chat. It does not distract me. I like to go back through it and make sure, and so that you can share. That's one of those things we'll talk a little bit about. It's like the more you share with people, the more you realize you're not the only one who's thinking that, right? And that helps to support you and others as you're growing professionally and building those relationships that you need in order to do so. So I encourage you to do that. Share what you like, don't share if you don't like. I will have some prompts that will be helpful to you, that regardless of whether you share in the chat, I highly encourage you to take note, to write them down for yourself for later reflection. I am a big advocate of reflection time and journaling time because it really feeds who we can become and who we are becoming. And it's always so fascinating to be able to pull out an old journal and to be able to look back and be like, wow, I have come a long way. Or to look back and be, well, maybe I got a little bit more work to do, right? So I encourage you to do that, because some of the things that I'm going to present to you will be one of those, oh, wow, I need to come back and think a little bit more about that. So I don't want you to lose that. I want you to be able to do that, because the purpose of this here is not, that's why I didn't want to do slides, is I didn't want it to be workshoppy. I want to have a conversation about building your relationships, making them in a way that's, you're creating these empowered connections so that you can grow moving forward. So that said, here's my first reflection question for you. When you hear the word networking, what is your initial response, feeling, or thought? Don't edit. Feel free to be expressive. Write it down for yourself, because this is really important later on as we talk about our mindsets, how we approach things and people, because this is at the core of that response, right? So feel free, write it down in the chat, write it down on your notes. I'm going to be curious to see some of those responses. Now, I don't want to lead anyone, but I can anticipate that a few eye rolling, yes, that is perfect. Thank you so much. I love that, because that is definitely one of the ones. Connecting, thank you. Building a community. Yes, we've got some folks who are into it. Information, very interesting. Yes. I have a few of my own, and that first one, eye rolling, kind of goes along with it, right? That ew feeling, the what a waste of time feeling, the nervous response in your gut. You physically have a response that's not positive to it, right? Or the, you know what, I'm fine, this is not really relevant or important to me. Someone said exciting but exhausting. I love that. All of those things are so true, because I hear them all the time, right? They're not new. And that's what I want you to share, not to be dismissive, but to let you know that it's common. And why is it common? Because the reality is that next to public speaking, networking is the most hated professional skill building tool that we all need. And that is so funny, because people are like, wow, I have to do this. but I don't want to. And that's the attitude most people approach. And it's the same one that they approach when they're doing, when they're having to do a public speaking presentation. I mean, people literally, get sick and pass out from those types of things, right? And so we're going to explore some of that here today, but we're going to shift, hopefully, your mindset about how to address it. I love that someone commented, it's definitely have to prepare myself mentally and then decompress afterwards. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And here's the thing. When there's a whole slew of false fears, I will say, not that the fear isn't genuine, but sometimes it's not based in fact or in reality, because we're responding to something that has been a negative experience or what someone has told us, right? And because conventional interpretation tells us that, well, this has to happen a certain way. We have to network a certain way. We have to engage a certain way. And I'm going to challenge you to think differently about that, okay? A lot of times people don't like it. They don't want to talk about it because they're scared of the unknown. There's a fear of rejection. They think it's a waste of time. And, or, it's not for me because I'm, quote, an introvert. That's my favorite, right? As if introverts don't have to have relationships that they work through every day as well. Okay. So here's one of those interesting things. I do a coffee time career chat twice a week. And on Wednesdays, I was interviewing a colleague of mine, and one of the people who were responded to something we were talking about and saying, well, I just don't understand how people can say that networking is not necessary or that it makes them feel bad because it's not necessary. It's something we all have to do. Here's the thing. Even though some people may question or judge another for those who don't believe that networking is a friendly type of engagement, it's also problematic to have that type of response. And here's why. Because the situation actually calls for compassion, not criticism. The reality is that regardless of whether someone considers the response legitimate or not, it is because that is how that person feels. And you cannot discount how another person feels regarding whether it's networking, public speaking, or something totally unrelated. The misunderstanding relates to that of others' discomfort with building relationships. And it's not something to be dismissive of, because normally when people have issues or concerns, it's not about the networking itself or the result of it, let me say, that the impact or the value that it brings, but rather it's one of those fears we mentioned, or because they probably had a really negative experience previously, and that's why it comes to that. So here's one of my favorite stories to tell. A few of you may have heard it before, so bear with me. But when I was a baby lawyer, I'm not a baby lawyer anymore. But when I was a baby lawyer working my first job out of law school, I was also hired to do lobby work. And as the baby lawyer, guess what I got to do? I got the bottom of the totem pole experience of getting to go to fundraising events and to hand over the check to the politician, shake their hands, and stick around for the reception. Now, if that doesn't make your skin crawl, I don't know what will. But that was a part of my job. Like, I had to do it. It was not optional. And it was not something I enjoyed. So I had to adapt in order to make sure that I could do what needed to be done, but also still be in integrity with myself as I'm doing it. So fast forward, what I would do is I would make a little tiny list. I would probably write it on a sticky note, because I'm a sticky note fanatic, and stick it in my purse. And I would say, I'm going to go to this reception and hand over this check. but I'm also going to look for this person because we're working on a piece of legislation together. I'm going to go check in with this other person because they just got back from a trip and I want to hear about it. I would give myself other reasons to engage when I got there so that it wasn't just focused on that icky thing that I had to do as part of my job. We're going to talk more about that during the course of this because we all have situations that we don't enjoy where we have to engage with others for professional purposes. But guess what? We can do it and still be in integrity and to do it authentically. And that's how we're going to talk about that. Because here's one of the things is when you have a negative experience embedded in your memory, we have to own it and then release it so we can grow from it. So whatever that situation is for you, write the story down, make reference to it. And then, let's learn from that. What was it about that experience that really, turned you off, that really made you feel like this is not something I want to do or engage in on a regular basis? Okay. And we're going to own that and we're going to talk about ways to overcome that and why it's important to in order to continue to grow from that experience. But here's how we can shift by changing your mindset and changing your approach to the role and use of networking, because that's why I will use the word professional relationship building. You did not see networking in the title of this presentation, did you? And that is deliberate because sometimes automatically people will turn off and not be open to listening to what else can be learned. So here's one of my favorite things that I really just came to a realization of recently, which is you can enjoy networking and relationship building because in reality, it's a creative process. It's a tool. And you're like, well, how is that possible? Well, when you define creative, it's talking about relating to or involving the imagination or original ideas, especially in the production of an artistic work. So how is this process? How is this thing, the skill that we have to engage in? How is it creative? Well, think about this. Think about how we have to imagine new ways of interacting with others in order to get engaged. Or secondly, considering innovative ways of bringing people together. Or lastly, what about being visionary about what we can be and who we can be if disconnected things and or people are introduced to each other? These are all ways in which we can be creative and how building relationships is actually part of a creative process. And that's what we can use as the foundation for really building authentic relationships and engaging in a way that's in integrity with purpose and deliberate. So how do we get to this point? First of all, you really have to focus on your why. The reason why people get caught up is they focus on the how and the what of what they need to do. And when we get all caught up in that, then we're just like lost, right? No one wants to get into that. But if you focus on the why, that's a different mindset. What do I mean by that? Well, what if you focus on, I need to learn more about a specific topic, let's say. And that's going to require me to attend more conferences, to join another association. And you may be like, I really don't want to do all that. But why do you need to learn that topic? Because you want to grow professionally, because you want to have an impact on others in your community or in your workplace, or because you're trying to build a legacy of some sort for your family or for your community. When you focus on your why and not the how first, make that your foundation for why you're moving forward. Because remember, I had to go hand over that check, but it wasn't because I liked doing it, right? But my why was I am a huge advocate. I loved the legislative process. I love being a lawyer, despite all the bad lawyer jokes. And I wanted to be an advocate. And that handing over that check was a part of the job, but it was not the entirety of it. All right. So don't just focus on the how and the what, focus on the why, and let that lead you and inspire and motivate you. So as we're doing this refresh and reset to focus on real connecting, on collaborating and caring, we're going to get through all of those things here today, and I'm super excited about it. The first thing is to remember connecting is about relationships. And here is the reason why traditional approaches to networking fails and why people feel icky about it. And it is what someone who is very, very brilliant in the chat mentioned, that it feels very transactional. And that is exactly the reason why it doesn't work when it fails. Because there is a difference than being transactional in your relationships versus moving forward in authenticity and being relational in how you engage. What do I mean? So when you relegate the realm of networking and relationship building to one little box of walking into a space or with other people focused on what can you get out of this situation, that is transactional. And here's the problem with transactional relationships. It's a one-shot deal. You go in, you get what you want, maybe, maybe not, and you're out. That's it. And then you have to do it again. And someone earlier on mentioned about how it can seem so exhausting. This is the reason why. Because if you have to gear yourself up physically every time to go in to address a situation, to engage with a new group of people that you don't know, and it's generating all of these negative physical responses, it is going to be exhausting because you're only focused on what can I get that at this point in time in this conversation, this experience. That's not the way to build authentic relationships. When you switch your view to what you can give and what you can receive, because it is still a two-way street, right? But it's not what you can take. Taking and receiving are not the same thing. When you give to others, others will be led eventually to give to you. It's a cycle. It is literally a fundamental piece of how, of our world. People want to give back, especially to those who have given to them. They want to support them. All right. And that's how you have to be open to receiving as well. And that's how you don't get exhausted from your interactions. That's how you keep feeding those relationships, nurturing them, and such that you're giving, you're receiving, and that cycle builds, the relationships deepen, and they expand. Transactional relationships don't do that. They're one shot, and then you have to start over. You have nothing to build on. Now, are there times when engaging in transactions are appropriate? Sure. But if you're really talking about growing as a person and as a professional, that is not the way to do it. All right. It will get exhausting. You will get disinterested. You will get resentful. All of those things will happen. And that does not feed you. It does not put you in the right mindset of being able to grow forward or to have a positive impact on other people. All right. So one of the most common mistakes, besides the transactional piece and only approaching it as a transaction, is if you relegate your networking to a single box. I think that right now in this time where we're addressing this international pandemic, at the end of year 2, that I would think that we would not be still in that mental space of putting things and people in a box, but unfortunately we are. And what do I mean by that? Well, I only have my work-related relationships over here. I have my personal ones over there, and I have community ones there, and none of them should ever meet. That is not going to work. We've been saying for years that we live in a global space, that we live in a global economy and all of this. And guess what? You don't get there by keeping all of your things and people and relationships in little boxes. It's just not going to work. And again, it gets exhausting. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries. You absolutely can maintain healthy boundaries while still integrating your relationships. All right. And it can be done successfully. It's probably going to take a little bit of effort on your part, because it requires something different for every person. We don't all have the same boundaries when it comes to engaging. But if we want to build relationships successfully, we're going to have to step out of our comfort zones, be vulnerable, which we'll talk about later, and be able to share across communities, across relationships, across types of people. I always like to make fun of myself because my son has been, playing football since he was 3. He's 15 now, and my daughter, who's 19, is a dancer, and she's been dancing since she was 5. Do you know how many hours I've spent at dance conventions, sitting on the side seat with other moms and dads for hours and days on end? And the same thing sitting in the stand at the football field. And if I just sat there, never anticipating needing to or thinking that the worlds would collide between what I do personally in supporting my family and what I do professionally, that would be really unrealistic. I have built some fantastic relationships in those convention halls, on those football fields in 100-degree weather. And there are things that come back and support our professional growth as well as our personal ones. And I'm thinking of, in particular, of a time when I was sitting on the sides of the football field, and I was looking at this gentleman, and I'm like, I feel like I know him, but I wasn't sure. And it turns out it was another person in my world in higher ed policy, out of context, kind of weirded me out, but it turned out our sons were playing on the same team. Had never realized that. Well, guess what happened? About a month later, I ended up in a meeting that I was leading with this person. And what was the first things out of our mouths? Hey, how are you doing? How are the boys? That's how we connected. Before we talked about any business, it was like, how are things going? How are what are they up to? We were able to engage and relate before we could even get down to the business at hand, because we had connected in that football stand. All right. Those are the opportunities that people miss out on when you try to keep things in a box. Because you can leverage, not use. Leverage and use are two different things. You can leverage those experiences and those opportunities to help you and help others as you pursue your goals, your dreams, your projects, whatever they may be. You want to connect with purpose, not randomly with hope that something will come of it. Because guess what? If you're random, you're going to get random responses, literally. So you want to be deliberate. You want to be purposeful. There's nothing wrong with that. What makes it icky is when you turn it into a transaction. I'm only coming to you, Susan, because I need or want this. Can you give this to me or not? If not, then I'm on my way. There have been so many times Susan and I have chatted. We have not discussed an ounce of business, right? And then there are times like I'm thinking of one time when we showed up for coffee and I was thinking we're having a chat, let's catch up about the family, what's going on. And she's like, oh, no, I need to discuss this issue. I'm like, oh, wait, let me shift, right? Because those are the things that you can do when you are in relationship with people. And you can only do that by being purposeful about how you engage on a regular basis. All right. Your efforts must be aligned with your goals personally and professionally. This is another reason why putting things in a little box does not work. Because I think well, there it is, the note right there, which is people can smell an inauthentic person. They can smell fake a mile away. Even if they can't put their finger on it right away, people have that, spidey sense of something's off here. And that's when someone that you may be trying to engage with is kind of standoffish. You're like, what's wrong with them? Well, sometimes it may be them, but sometimes we have to do a little internal review of our own, which is, how am I coming across? Is there something that's keeping them from connecting to me? Am I coming across as being transactional in this? I have a colleague that we've known each other for, years and years. And we met professionally, and I've done projects for his organization. We worked together when I was at the agency, doing all kinds of different things. And we will catch up, 1 or 2 times a year in person in regular times, right? And the first things out of his mouth would be, hey, how's the family? How are you? What are you up to? What do you need? Those are the words that he would put to me. And I had to learn to respond to that because I wasn't used to people doing that. Most people just come at you and they're like, well, I have this and we need this and da, da, da. But when you have someone who's coming at you to say, hey, how are you doing? That puts things on a whole different level. And when we could get together and discuss and talk about everything but business for 20 minutes, but then take care of business in the last 10, that's the power of a long-standing relationship. It doesn't take a whole lot of time to get most things done. What really it's all about is what's the relationship that you're working from. Because if there's no relationship, it's going to take longer to get to where you need to be and what you want to be. But if there is a relationship, it's much, much easier. I'm talking from decades of legislative work that, bills can be passed based on relationship. What's the relationship with the sponsor, with the people who are in need? It can make or break it. We'll talk about trust in a little bit. So when you're connecting with purpose, couple of different things. I'm thinking about times when you need to create your own little personal mastermind, right? We're not going to get deep into that. That's a whole other conversation. But here's that thought when you're thinking about connecting with people and you're like, I need input on a particular thing. Who can I reach out to do that? I did this several times during the course of my career, especially when I was making major transitions, right? And one of the things that you hear several things that would come up. Well, I need people that I respect who are not going to just be yes people, right? Who are just going to say, oh, yes, everything's wonderful, but who are going to be honest with me and give me the feedback that I need, not just the feedback that I want. Okay, you get there by building relationships. You want diversity of perspectives, right? There's nothing worse than you can go to 5 people, but if all your 5 people look and sound exactly the same, that's not really going to be helpful or healthy for you. You want to engage with people who are innovative in their thinking and that will challenge you and yet still be supportive of you. And at the crux of all of this is a willingness by you to share in a vulnerable manner. Because if you have a need or if you have a challenge, it means you have to own that with someone and be willing to receive the feedback that they give based on what you share. And this is why it's important to build those relationships in a way so that, because the last thing you want is to not share fully and you get a response based on incomplete information. How damaging is that? How many of you have been caught in a situation like that before? Okay. And that can be very damaging personally and professionally and can break trust very quickly. I can probably count on one hand a number of times that I've said, I will never, ever deal with that person again. And it was because they acted out of integrity, which normally means there was some major lying going on, some major untruths, putting you in a bad spot with your boss. And since I work for several elected officials, that is not a good spot to be in, but it's happened. But those are when I feel very strongly, it was like, if someone pushes you to that point and you don't trust them anymore, you cannot be in relationship with them. And so it's really important not to ignore your relationships. It's dangerous because an unnurtured relationship is like a tree that's not being watered. It's like a plant that's not being watered. What happens? It's eventually going to die. If you don't water the roots, it cannot grow. If you don't feed it sunlight, it cannot grow. The same thing with your relationships. How do you feel when someone you haven't talked to in any way, outside of the pandemic, right? This is a little bubble, that's not the norm. So let's talk about when you receive an email or a phone call from someone you haven't talked to in 5 years, who hasn't reached out to you in any capacity, and the first thing they do is ask you for help. How does that make you feel? A little used, a little like, really? They really just did that? I've had that happen. And guess what? That puts me in a space of not trusting that person because they violated what I thought we had as a relationship. They didn't put the effort in to come back and nurture or even to acknowledge, oh my gosh, I know we haven't chatted in a long time. How are you? Someone said it feels weird. It absolutely does. It feels weird. It feels disconnected. And you don't trust that person. So we want to be aware of not just how others are treating us, but how are you treating other people? And to be aware of that. When people want to ignore that, that's just dangerous. That's how you end up with these office environments that are toxic. People don't trust each other. They're not in relationship. And that is an unhealthy place to be in so many ways. Okay. So truth-telling time. Here's one of your reflection points. Where have you been ignoring or undervaluing relationships in your networking circle? You don't have to share. This is for you to acknowledge. Take that time to really give it some thought. And I know that people, and someone asked, and we'll definitely have to leave time for questions and answers at the end, but I noticed that someone asked about, how do you even keep up in the midst of this pandemic? And people say, well, you can't do that. Guess what? It can. You can still do it. I'm going to talk a little bit later about how I have met people from all over the world in the midst of this pandemic. In 2021, my network has expanded tremendously. So it's still possible. It's going to require a little effort. It's going to require thinking outside the box. And it's going to require acknowledging where you have fallen down and, and engage in some missteps with people that you are in relationship with or that you were in relationship with, and how you can nurture them back to health if that is something that you really choose and want to do. Okay? That's going to look different for everyone. It's going to look different for everyone. So when you build out those connections and you're working on strengthening those relationships, the natural next piece is you got to work together with people, right? This is the collaboration part. And collaboration is a key part, a key component of networking and growing professionally. I talked about my career as a professional lobbyist and lawyer, and it's all about identifying people and relationships that can benefit from each other. I mean, that's the nature of the job. But even within that, which can be very transactional, right? And in spaces that people are only coming because, well, I need something from this person. But guess what? Even in that environment, you can build relationships that will sustain over time, regardless of what you're working on. I literally laughed out loud last week when I got a random email from one of my former business partners that I lobbied with. And he asked me some question that had nothing to do with legislation or any policy matter. He was like, yeah, I know you keep up with a lot of stuff, so I just want to ask you this. And it made me laugh, because those are kinds of connections and requests I get all the time. And that happens because I built up a sustainable relationship. And even though we haven't worked directly together, I think it's been like, I don't know, 7 years, there's still that check-in point. There's still that, hey, can you help me with? Hey, I just learned about someone who needs some help and I referred them to you. You can only do that if there's trust and a relationship that's there, and where you've worked together with someone so that you know and respect what they bring to the table. Okay? It requires taking a risk. A lot of times that's another thing that makes people uncomfortable. But think about it, whether it's a personal relationship or professional relationship, there's always an element of risk, right? There's that risk that someone's not going to receive or that you're going to be rejected. It's okay. It may hurt our feelings, but it'll be all right, right? Go get a nice cup of coffee for me, some chocolate, ice cream, make you feel all kinds better. And I'm poking fun, but seriously, it is true that I'm not saying that there aren't risks involved in building relationships, but the rewards are so much greater and longer lasting when you put in the time and the effort, because people respond to that. One of my most challenging experiences is when I worked at the Texas Education Agency. I think that may be where Susan and I first met. I'm not sure, some years ago. But as part of that, and I'll talk a little bit more about the challenging part of it, but as part of that, one of the things that had to be done was I was the lead contact and creator for developing the P16 College and Career Readiness Strategic Plan for the state. It was something that hadn't been done before. It required pulling people together from K-12, higher ed, workforce, even health and human services. And people were like, how in the world are we going to make this happen? But we did. And not only did we pull it together to have a plan for the state, we actually got it into statute to make it something that would be required moving forward, because we all had a common goal of wanting to improve our education, our educational development in the state for our children. And all of these elements were required to be a part of it. So whether we wanted to or not, we had to work together. And if there were some angsty moments, there were definitely moments where we did not agree. I remember a couple of conversations that I had to have with my commissioner at the time of, hey, there needs to be a call over to this other place and we need to have a chit chat, right? But you can do that because you all understand your why, and we all had common goals that we knew we needed to work towards and to build out and build on the relationships that many of us had personally, right? And to be able to address those situations. I remember during one of those conversations got pretty heated, and it did generate me having to make a call to the commissioner at the time to say, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to need you to make a phone call. And when I will never forget it, I was on the road somewhere and I got a call from one of the other people from the agency, someone I'd known for years, who called me to say, I'm so sorry that that happened to you in that meeting. I will apologize on behalf of myself and everyone else. Why? Why bother? Because we had a relationship that was in jeopardy, and not just professionally, but personally. Okay, so it does matter how you engage with people over time and how it can impact what you do, not just today in what you do, but what you may do in 5 or 10 years. That's when we're talking about building sustainable relationships that work. You also want to make sure that you are looking at when you're collaborating, connecting, that you're supplementing your strengths and your weaknesses. That's the whole point. I mean, really, that's why we collaborate on things, right? Because no one person knows everything. But there's an element of vulnerability when you have to acknowledge, I don't know everything, so I do need some help. And being able to pull in the right people, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's the name of the game. That's the point. And you can help to further a project, a goal quicker when you are in a relationship with people or someone who can help you to get to the right people. All right. I'm a big fan of saying everything that comes to you is not for you. That is another thing that that people make a huge mistake in when they're networking or building relationships, because they're like, oh, well, that's not helpful to me, so I don't need to know about it. Guess what? I have lots of random information in my head that doesn't relate to me, but it's because I know there are people who could benefit from it, and I share it with my network on a regular basis. And that's the reason why I generate and get those random questions out of nowhere, because people know that's something that I do. I don't take in information. Someone mentioned about networking being about information. I don't take in information just for my own purpose. I take it to share back out with others, because everything that comes to me is not for me. That is another important shift in mindset and how that builds out your relationships professionally and personally. I talked a little bit about the diversity of perspectives, and this is really important when you're collaborating, right? Having a diversity of thought and experiences all up and down the chain, whether it's young people and older people working together, whether it's people with differing experiences. All of these things matter. Different backgrounds, different perspectives. It's super important to have. I'm not going to linger here because that's not the focus of this conversation, but there's nothing worse than being in a room and you look around and yours is the only perspective that can offer it. I have been in some pretty top-notch rooms, and I've had to be an advocate for, for brown and Black children because there was no one else in the room. But guess what? I was able to do that, and to do it in a respectful manner because of the relationships I had with the people in the room. Everything doesn't have to be confrontational, right? And that's another reason why some people are like, oh, I don't want to engage with that person, because it's not always confrontational. Exchanging ideas that are different does not have to be confrontational. It's absolutely a learning opportunity for everyone involved. And sometimes, oftentimes, we have to actively engage with diversifying who we relate with. Take a deep look at what does your network look like? Is it homogenous? Is it all people of the same race, the same ethnicity, the same, industry? And start being more thoughtful about how you can actively diversify who you engage with, because that only strengthens you and the people you work with. Okay. When it comes to building out team relationships, wow, there's so many things here. But one of the things that's super important to rebuilding and reconnecting teams is you've got to make the effort, and it's crucial to success. I mentioned when I was at TEA, and I had the immense challenge of reintegrating the certification responsibility back into the agency. It had been out on its own for 10 years. It was highly dysfunctional, problematic, and was being reintegrated back into the fold. There was a group of people who had no trust. They did not trust leadership. They had been disappointed many times. There were people who were not in the proper responsibilities or spaces. And there I was, as a young African-American female, being charged with the responsibility of bringing these people together and back into the fold. And it was so challenging that I had one of my colleagues come to me privately and said, are you sure about this? Because this could be a career-ending move. It was that challenging. But I'm like, no, I think I'm good for it. And then what happened? This person says, great, I'm here for you. Let's make it happen. I still get chills about that, right? Because even though there were crazy things that happened, we dealt with Hurricane Katrina, we were rewriting rules that had been messed up for years, all of these things. But because of the support that I had from others in leadership, we were able to do things that other people were like, how is that even possible? Like, we've never been able to do that. Like, well, it takes a little special touch. Right? But you can make things happen no matter how challenging the situation. Making difficult decisions is possible when you've built relationships, when you've collaborated, when you get people on board to like, hey, this is not going to be easy, or this may be challenging, but we can move forward. But there are going to be some bumps. There are going to be some things that we have to do in order to make it happen. But you have to help your people get confident. You have to empower them to take action and become stronger in their interactions, right? But they have to feel supported in those efforts. And they're not going to feel supported if you're not reaching out to them, if you're not connecting them with them, if you're not helping them to understand where they are and how they fit in with the team. Team leaders have to take the steps necessary to identify the relationship needs of your people. This is one of those things that goes unresolved and overlooked horribly. And then people are like, what in the world is going on? And when people are leaving organizations by the thousands, it's because they don't feel connected. They feel overlooked. They don't feel heard. And that's why you see what's happened over the course of this pandemic, and it's still happening. And so it's super important, especially today, to be able to do that. Now, I'm going to throw a little messy bone out there because this requires us going beyond the once a year retreat or team building exercise. That is not what we're talking about. That is just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about putting in place processes, changing of mindsets so that you can build relationships over time, continuously, not just for the fancy dinner once a year. Okay, I'm gonna stop messing with that. One of the other things I like to say is that this includes, when you're talking about this team piece, this includes vision-based networking. What do I mean by that? Well, it's about making decisions based on where you are headed and opening up opportunities for growth and transition. That's what leaders do. You don't just make the decisions based on what's going on right now, but also for where you need to be, and helping people along the way so that they are in place, that they are aligned when it's time to get to that point. When you get there, sometimes if you haven't planned properly, it's too late. And so that's why I call it vision-based networking. It is a total waste of time to identify your relationship needs, but not make the actual connections for your people. You have wasted everybody's time. But when you step outside that box, and let's say you identify that forward-thinking person on your team and leverage their enthusiasm and willingness to grow to help build the relationships across the team, across the organization, man, you are really lighting a fire and can get the momentum going. And this involves letting go of ego, feeling threatened, being a little more vulnerable by acknowledging I don't have all the answers, but let me identify someone who can help me to achieve the vision. Totally different thing. All right. I love to remind people that not all leaders have titles. Some of the best leaders I know do not have a fancy title in front of or behind their name. I'm thinking of one who was my executive assistant, and I would tell all the time, I'm like, if I could have her still beside me to this day, I would, because she knew what it meant to be a leader without a title, to take action, to build the trust, to interact with people to achieve whatever the common goal was, and never had to worry about this person not being in integrity and representing what I needed done, even sometimes anticipating it for me. So remember, not all leaders have titles. You can be a leader wherever you are without the title. So that's my next reflection point for you to take note of. Where can you show up as a leader without having a title? How can you impact the growth of your team, of the people around you? How can you support them? What can you give? What can you bring to the conversation to help move forward the agenda, the goal, whatever it is you're focusing on? Okay. I mentioned how across the time of this pandemic, I have built relationships with people all over the world. It has been the most phenomenal experience. I went from wondering how in the world, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to speak and talk to people, to literally giving dozens of presentations, not just here in Texas, not just here in the States, but in Australia, in Canada. I was just like, this is phenomenal. I'm just thinking about all the great places I have to go visit once we're all in the clear. You know, I've got a whole slew of new besties in Canada. I'm just going to traipse around Canada for a few months, right? And hang out with them. But that's the power of putting yourself out there, even in the midst of challenging times. I never could have anticipated that. Never could have. And some of these same women who I've never laid eyes on except through a camera call me for advice. Hey, can we schedule a connect call? I need to get your input on this. Or I've called several of them. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's something going down and I really need to get an objective viewpoint on this. So there is power in when you take the time to build those relationships, to help then build those strategic partnerships, to collaborate and to move things forward, not just for yourself, but for other people. And that's where the power comes from. But we can't end things without talking about the caring part. And the bottom line are these 4 things. You have to focus on others first. You have to be willing to give and receive, not take. Be human and reach out deliberately and strategically. That's just the bottom line foundation to how you can be effective in building strong relationships that are sustainable over time. I mentioned when we started with the pandemic, I was like, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to do? No one's, bringing people in. And then I realized, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to talk about the very thing that we're all having problems with, which is how do we maintain our relationships in a crisis? So without an audience, I created this presentation and I just started delivering it through online in my coffee chats, saying, hey, I know we're all in this space. Here's what I bring to the table to help us get over it. And 2 years later, guess what? I am still giving that presentation. This time though, because people are calling me and asking me for that presentation. I never could have anticipated it. What started as this is how I can give back in this time. This is the skill set that I bring to the table and how I can help people is now 24 months later, still bringing value, still getting requests. That's what happens when you bring your whole self to the table. When you're human, when you acknowledge that there are needs out there and you may not be able to address everyone's need, but you don't have to address everyone's need. Your impact on one person can be so powerful that you can't even anticipate it. So I want you to think about right now and write down the names of 3 to 5 people that you will reach out to starting next week. That person whose name flits across your brain while you're grocery shopping, you're like, where'd that come from? Write it down. The person who you're like, I've been meaning to email them, but I keep forgetting, write it down. That person you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. I haven't talked to them since before the pandemic. Write it down. Someone asked for those 4 areas of focus. It's number 1, focus on others first. Number 2, be willing to give and receive, not just take. Number 3, remember to be human. And number 4, reach out deliberately and strategically. All right. But when you put that on your tasks of things to do as a part of who you are, reaching out regularly, that will build this momentum that I just can't even begin to tell you how powerful it is. This is a practice I've engaged in for decades. And it is a practice. And it is something you actively have to do, but it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to take a long time. If I told each of you right now to go out and connect with 200 people this year, y'all would shut me down right now. Like, it would be like, let me turn off my sound. I don't want to hear anything else she has to say. So I don't tell people that. I say instead, reach out to 3 to 5 people. Someone said, yep, I'm out. 3 to 5 people a week, 15 minutes tops. It can take more depending on what you're going to do, right? I still like to do handwritten notes, so that may take me a little bit more time. But do the math on what that looks like if you do that 3 to 5 people per week, every week. It's a marathon, not a sprint. That's what you need to remember when you're building relationships and you're wanting to make sure you have impact. We're focused on quality, not quantity. I could go back in the day when we were doing live in-person happy hours, which I detested, but I would go for whatever reason, and I would focus on connecting and trying to connect with 2 or 3 people. There could be 100 people in the room. I didn't care. I had moved past the trying to connect with as many people as possible, trying to find that right person, but instead sitting there. What it is, it's like having a conversation about the latest book you're reading, or if you hear someone talking about a trip they took, you're like, ooh, I want to hear more about that. And someone would say, well, that's a waste of time. Guess what? It's not. Because when I follow up with that person, I could say, hey, it was so great talking to you about that book, about that trip, about that experience. I would love to follow up with you. Or if you need anything from me, please do not hesitate to call and contact me. That will take you a much longer way than a bunch of business cards that you're looking at later and you're like, who was this? And who was that? I saw someone note that, like, I don't pass out business cards anymore. And I'm like, I'm with you. I stopped passing out business cards before the pandemic. That's a whole other strategy I'm happy to share if anyone wants to reach out to me. And why, right? Because it's about the connection, not just getting and taking people's names that you don't do anything with. That's a waste of time. So think about how much of a greater impact you can have with someone and focus on that and the quality of the interaction rather than how many interactions that you have. Okay. Here's that little bit of a conversation about vulnerability. Leadership and vulnerability are at the core of authentic networking. What do I mean? First of all, leaders have to earn the trust of their people. And since I've already said leaders don't have to have titles, that means that we can all be leaders in some shape or form or fashion. Leaders have to earn the trust of their people in order to inspire, guide, or even correct them in order to achieve the goal at hand. But people also need to know that you're human, that you're not perfect, that you don't have all the answers, but you're willing to get them. You're willing to learn. The act of networking in and of itself requires vulnerability because it means you're like, hey, this person may have something to offer that I don't know about, that I don't have. And I'm willing to explore that and to open up. Again, do we have boundaries? Sure. Put your boundaries in place, whatever they are, but don't make your boundaries so tight that no one can get past and be able to get to the real you. Okay, because then you miss out on the opportunity to share and to connect. One of my dearest mentors and friends today is an older woman who I went to church with for years. And we had never worked together professionally, right? Never, ever. Until I, started my legislative consulting business and I was picking up some different projects. And she had a tech background and I needed someone with that background to do this evaluation in this project. Because there's this language, I'm like, I can't, right? Like, that's not my background. And she was like, well, I've never done that before in that capacity, but sure, I'll do it. And I was nervous about it. And I took a chance because this is someone I knew from, my church. We'd never worked together in this fashion before. And even if the project itself had mixed results, there was a point where I was feeling badly because there were certain things I wanted to happen that didn't happen. And I was all caught up in like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think about me? Until I had a conversation with her where she informed me that she was honored that I had asked her to be a part of that project because it forced her to stretch herself in a way she hadn't thought of before, that she learned something about herself that she had actually enjoyed. And as a result of that, the relationship with her has grown since then. And she has become someone who has a very special role in my life, personally and professionally. But it's only because I had that moment of vulnerability of, number one, reaching out to someone with an experience I didn't have, of getting over the fact of what is someone going to think about me if this doesn't work, that has allowed this relationship to deepen over time, and such that I contact her all the time about business matters because she understands where I come from. She's worked with me. She understands my goals, what I'm trying to achieve. And then she has that special little touch of being able to layer on a little bit of spiritual perspective to help me get back aligned. It has become one of the most powerful relationships that I have today that I never could have anticipated. This is what can happen. Some of you may know that January is National Mentoring Month, and which is a great opportunity, right, to share with our students, but not just our students, but also with our colleagues. Because mentoring can go both up and down, right? Sideways. And I've served as a mentor for folks for decades, especially because someone took the time to mentor me, and both personally and professionally. And so when I speak to groups of students, I always lay out a challenge of saying, I'm speaking to this room full, and I'm going to tell you only a handful of you are going to actually come talk to me. And then only a couple of you are going to follow up and actually use my personal cell phone number that I'm about to give you. And people are like, you do what? I do it because it's a challenge. And my experience has told me that everyone's not going to do it. Why? Because they're scared, they're intimidated, they question her like, well, does she really mean that? I can't really possibly mean that. But the ones who take that leap of faith, they're like, she said, I'm not going to reach out. Guess what? I am. And those are the ones who win in the end. Because I will take them under my wing. I will follow up with them. Right? But I also don't stop making the offer just because everyone doesn't take me up on it. Because my focus, again, is on quality, not quantity. I've spoken, I've made the offer, and those who choose to take me up on it will. And I'm like, guess what? We're going to work together. I'm going to do whatever I can. It looks different for all of them, whether they're high schoolers versus whether they're college students, or even young professionals, okay? But don't make the mistake of letting your mentees down. Honor the commitment. It's a teachable experience for both of you. I have learned so much from the people I have mentored. And remember when I said, when you're building relationships, it's a two-way street. And that applies even in this. So I'm about to be finished, so I can take some questions, but I have to share this one last story, which is when I was a college student, my anthropology professor called me out in class one day. And the anthropology class was one that was a part of my minor, which was African American studies. But he scared the bejesus out of me because I was like, why is he calling me out? So I thought I was in trouble. And so I go to talk to him and he's like, so you're a government major, right? I'm like, well, yes, sir. He's like, well, I have a friend who works for the governor. And at the time, that was Governor Richards. And she's looking for someone to be an intern for her. I was so blown away that I couldn't even speak. And he thought maybe I wasn't interested. I'm like, no, I'm very interested. So I went over to talk to this person who was at that time the Senate liaison for Governor Richards, an African-American woman engaged in the legislative process. And that is where I started. And a year later, when I was away at law school, and I'm like, I gotta go back, I don't have a job, I called her and I was like, Yvonne, she's like, hey, how are you doing? I'm like, I don't have a job. She's like, oh my gosh. She's like, call me back tomorrow. I called her back the next day. And she says, when are you getting in town again? And I told her, and she says, you have an interview with this person. Let me know how it goes. And when I tell that story, I always follow up with the fact that literally everything in my career, I can point back to that original mentor because every next step I took stemmed from the previous one. We got to a point that when I was working for the lieutenant governor, or I was getting asked to come work for the lieutenant governor, I called her for advice. And she was like, why are you still calling me for advice? I need to be calling you for some advice now. Which just honored me. And our relationship shifted a little bit because she would start calling me. She's like, I need your input on this, right? It has been 30 years and we are still in touch. She's still keeping an eye out on me. She does it through LinkedIn. And then when we were traveling, if she was coming back to Texas, she would make sure to touch bases with me. If I'm going to DC, I would touch bases with her. And we don't have to see each other all the time. We don't have to even physically talk all the time. But if she calls or if I call her, I know she will answer that phone. That is the power that each and every one of you have in your relationships. So here's my challenge to you for this year. Number one, identify where you can show up better for others and thereby show up better for yourself. Number two, where can you lead without a title in connecting and collaborating with others? Number three, who can you mentor up or down to? And lastly, making sure that you reach out deliberately to 3 to 5 people every week and watch the momentum build and grow in your network as your growth as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. And I'm happy to answer any questions that I may have missed. So let me see, I'm going to do this here in the chat. I saw one that just popped up when someone asked, what led you to go to law school in California? How did you find the courage to move out of state? Well, I was always the kid, always trying to move somewhere. So my own mother used to tell me she would write my name and address in pencil in her little address book because she knew I was always going to be changing. But honestly, I ended up in California because I would never make this decision the same way today. But I had a list of, a couple of places. And honestly, Pepperdine came up because of my pastor at the time. He didn't have a relationship to it. He just said, this looks like a good school, and I think you should apply to it. Like totally random, y'all. And then when they send that beautiful 20 by 24 catalog that has a view of the what is that, the Pacific Ocean? Well, it's kind of hard to turn that down. Someone comments, I think I saw this early, that networking is tougher virtually. Any additional tips, especially if someone is an introvert? Yes. So my first thing for people who say that they're introverts or whatever, I'm like, you guys should be winning. Like, this is your time to shine. Because when you are networking and interacting with people virtually, you have so many options where you can reach out to them via email. Not my favorite, because everyone's buried in email, right? But utilizing your social media platforms, right? Everyone here should be connected on LinkedIn. I'm just going to put that out there. Sorry, that's the coaching part of me that says you need to make sure that you are on one platform, and LinkedIn is it, because it is directed at professionals. And it is the way that I have kept up with people for years, right? And why? Because it's easy to see when they've moved on, what they're doing differently. Okay, so, but there are tons of ways you can do that. You can control an introvert. A lot of times, most of the time, they have issues with big crowds and doing the happy hour and being a natural. Here's why this is powerful for you if you're an introvert. Applies to everyone, but especially introverts. You have more control over who you talk to and when. You can schedule the interaction. You can schedule a call. You can schedule a Zoom call connection. All the power is in your hands. So utilize that, shift your mindset about it, and recognize you're even more control about who you can connect with and how. I'm not saying avoid the groups, because you still need to practice that. That's a whole other conversation. But just recognize there's so much power in your hands now to be able to engage at a much deeper level. How do you strategically network and not come across as inauthentic or stalking? Be honest. Just be honest. If you've met someone at a conference, that's one of those things. So that's how I would always kind of track where I met people, right? Hey, it was great seeing you. We attended this conference, and I wanted to follow up with and schedule some time to chat if you have time. Always be respectful of people's time, acknowledge where you met them, and be upfront about what it is you're connecting with them about. I connect with people sometimes, I don't have a deliberate thing, but there's something that I felt, spoke to me about it. And I'll be like, hey, I would just love to have a conversation to figure out if there's some way that we can support each other. Okay, it's all about being genuine and being human, right? Not just searching up all of this stuff and then saying, okay, I learned this, what can you give me as in return? Right? I hope that helps. Let's see. I was trying to move up. Is it intrusive to reach out to a person in an area that you are interested in, even if you don't know them on a personal level? No, it is not. That's when you're very mindful and you're very deliberate in how you reach out. and you prepare. You don't just do it, but you may say, okay, I'm going to reach out to this person by either by email or through a message. Or let's say you go check and you say, hey, Patricia, I see you're connected to this person. Are you able or willing to connect me to them, because I'm interested in learning more about this from them, right? That's what networking is about. It's connecting with the people around you, leveraging those relationships to extend your network. Okay. Let's see, move up, trying to make sure I don't miss anyone. And tell me how we are on time. I'm trying to be mindful of that. Got those 4 areas. Any other questions?
I think we have a couple more minutes, and I know Dr. Williams wanted to, any favorite books? But Dr. Williams wanted to have some closing words. And I just wanted to say thank you again for being with us and for connecting your presentation to the things that we're working on here at the college. And so if you want to take Rachel's question, and then Dr. Williams will close us out.
Any favorite books? So one of the books I love is by, and of course, just because you asked, I'm going to lose my words on it, but it's called it's by Judy Robinette. That's the author. And it's the power of, I think it's the power of super connecting. If you look up Judy Robinette, you will find her. And it's a book about networking and about how you only need, 5 or 50 people, and then let it build on itself. It's really interesting. When I first read it, I was like, she took all my ideas, so that's how aligned I felt with it. There are definitely some other things. I'm happy to put together a list, and I don't want to waste run over here, but I'm happy to put together a list of some of the good books that are not just on networking, but on relationship building and those type of things. Yes, thank you, whoever found that. How to Be a Power Connector by Judy Robinette. That's absolutely the book. But I will put together a list of some of my favorite books and podcasts and things like that, and share it with Susan or Dr. Williams to share out with you guys. That work?
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Patricia. There is so much that resonated with me. I definitely could speak to, and it felt like my story, but being aligned with some amazing mentors has opened so many doors for me, provided so many opportunities for me. And I hope that I give that back to them as well. Networking, even in my role here at ACC, being aligned with people like Dr. Thomason, Mr. Retta, Terry Barksdale, Dr. Beegert, so many great folks here. They make my work even more impactful. They make the work of the centers that much more impactful. So it's really, sometimes getting out of our own ways and setting our ego aside and realizing that when we network, we partner with folks, the work can be so much greater and so much more impactful. So I thank you for all your messages. I took so much from it, and I hope everyone else did. I think that this conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we make institutions in our community more just and more caring to serve others, I think it means we have to partner with folks. We need their gifts and their talents, even if we have some great stuff to bring to the table. So I thank you so much for your message. I thank you, TLED and Dr. Thomason. I say this all the time, but I've been at 5 institutions now, and this is by far the best institution in terms of how we support our faculty, our staff as well, but especially our faculty around professional development and care around these issues. So thank you for this being a priority and for being willing to always partner with us. And thank you to all the participants for being a part of this and a part of the whole TRHT week. We have some amazing interpreters. Their team have been here every step of the way this week. So thank you for being a part of this event and supporting us and making sure our events are accessible. Thank you to Balan and Jay for our support on the kind of the back end. Thank you for everything you do to make these things work for us. Safiro's in this room. She's our admin for the TRHT Campus Center. Thank you to her. And I just wanted to say we have one more event for TRHT week at 12 o'clock. We'll be putting a spotlight on our Round Rock Early College high school students. They are doing this equity and justice work as well. So if you have some time in your schedule, we'd love to have you join us at 12. And beyond that, enjoy your Friday, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for being in the fight with us.
Thank you.
There's a survey, a link to the survey in the chat as well. We're always looking for feedback. So if you haven't, please take a few moments to give us some feedback. Thank you.
Patricia, I'll connect with you again. You're on my list of 5.
Yes, ma'am.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Took your language away from you during slavery. The only language you know is his language, you know.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Trish.
So you call him, you call for the same God he calls for.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Let's connect.
Absolutely. I will, let's see. Oh, I have your email.
Oh, yeah. If you're connected to Susan, you're connected to me. So bye-bye, y'all.